Startup Nation, we tell you all the time that no one does anything great on their own. That includes starting a business or a nonprofit, or even becoming a thought leader or an influencer. My point is that you need a team to do it successfully and responsibly. And that is why you should contact DR and Associates. Danielle and her team provide branding solutions, along with digital and social media marketing that provide tangible results you are looking for. No matter if you are a Fortune 500 company or an author looking to make an impact, DR and Associates needs to be part of your team. They are one of the few firms whose leadership has been recognized by Google, which is proof of concept that they are very good at what they do. Contact DR and Associates today to grow your online presence. The number is 615-933-3681, or you can visit their website at drandassociates.com. Also, make sure you follow their Facebook page as well. DR and Associates, providing real clients with real results. Tresta powers this episode of The Startup Life. Okay, Startup Nation, I want to talk to you about our sponsor, Tresta. Tresta is an app for iPhone and Android that lets you do business calling and texting from anywhere. I know so many entrepreneurs that are still using their personal phone number for business calls. It can get complicated drawing the line between your personal and professional life. Startup Nation, this is the best business phone app out there. Whether you just need a business phone number or if your team is ready for a complete business phone system, Tresta is totally flexible and can grow with your business. And it's all unlimited calling, texting, and all of the powerful call management features like auto attendance, call recording, user groups, and more for just $15 per user per month. With Tresta, there's no contract, and you don't need any special hardware, just your smartphone you're already using. Tresta is easy to configure, so you can set everything up yourself, all online, avoiding all the hassle and high overhead costs of setting up a traditional business phone system, which is important because as entrepreneurs, we are always trying to cut cost and time. They're offering a 30-day free trial so you can see if Tresta's virtual phone system is right for you. Communicate smarter and more efficiently with Tresta. Start now at Tresta.com/startuplife. That's TRESTA.com/startuplife. The link is there in the show notes if you're listening on the podcast. Tresta, business communication simplified.
It's time to be about that life, the startup life. Here's your host, Dominic Lawson.
All right, Startup Nation, I hope you're ready to receive some value today. My name is Dominic Lawson, and this is The Startup Life, the show for entrepreneurs and career-minded professionals. And today, Startup Nation, we have a great guest for you on the show for today. Now, Startup Nation, look, there's going to be times in our businesses where, let's be honest, we screw up and we need to apologize. There's also going to be times where we didn't do anything wrong, but the perception that we did something wrong is going to be out there. So we need to know how to navigate that. So which is why we have the perfect guest on how to navigate that for you today, Startup Nation. He is a publicist, a writer, and an occasional musician. He founded the public relations and digital communications consultancy Essential Content, based there in Manchester, England. And he's also the author of The Apology Impulse, How the Business World Ruined Sorry and Why We Can't Stop Saying It. He is my friend, my mate from across the pond, Sean O'Meara. How's it going, Sean?
Quite a lot. How are you? Glad to be here.
I can't complain, man. I can't complain. Are you ready to pour some knowledge in the Startup Nation today?
I am ready. Let's do it.
All righty, let's do it. So let's hop right into it, Sean. Fascinating book. But before we get into the book, I just want to hear your origin story. Kind of share with us what Sean's all about, where he comes from, and all that great stuff.
Cool. Okay. So I've got a kind of weird backstory.
Okay.
Trained as a musician. That's what I studied at university, and then kind of fell into journalism in a weird sort of way. Blame my brother for that. He was involved in publishing. He had a startup before you called them startups. This was back in the late 90s. He was a dog trainer. That was his day job. And what he realized was that he couldn't get any good information about normal dog ownership. The only stuff you could really find was the kind of very niche kind of show dog results, that kind of thing. So he created a website for your regular dog lover, and then people loved it. So what happened was kind of the publishing model in reverse. So he started online and then went into print, which is kind of back to front now, but obviously it was more expensive to go into print. When he went into print, he needed somebody who could spell to do his proofreading. So
Gotcha.
I was finishing university, and I had two choices one summer. One was to go and work in a tin factory, which wasn't as appealing as you might think. It was kind of the local employer for, you know, short-term students who were on their summer holidays. So I tried that for a week. I wasn't cut out for it. I wasn't tough enough, let's say. So I took my brother's offer and started off proofreading, and then I worked my way up through his company, and that's when I realized that journalism might be a career for me. And the good thing about writing about dogs is that you cover a lot of ground, because you've got your dog needs food, so you need to learn about dog food,
Right.
you need to learn about nutrition, you need to learn about health, pet insurance, legal stuff. So it really gave me an unexpectedly good grounding in consumer affairs journalism. So then I moved on into being a consumer affairs writer. And then I did what a lot of journalists tend to do, which is what we call moving over to the dark side. So I went from being a journalist, receiving pitches from publicists, to becoming a publicist. So it was kind of poacher turned gamekeeper a little bit. Or gamekeeper turned poacher. And then what I realized was I had really, really good informal training as a publicist, because I'd been on the other side of the fence. I'd
Right.
had, you know, probably in my time as a journalist, I dare say, let's say 50 pitches a day for 5-6 years. So I learned on the job how to write a good PR pitch. And
Interesting.
that's kind of what gave me a bit of confidence to move over. So I did some in-house stuff, and then I was freelance. Now, the freelancing was good, but what I didn't know at the time, that and this is something I'm glad I know now, is that even if you're freelance, you need to treat yourself as a business.
I hear
And what
that.
I was doing was I was you know, I was kind of charging for my time rather than charging for my skill. So the freelancing got messy. I wasn't running it properly, so I ended up going back in house. Then went agency side, which for me was hell. Couldn't stand the agency life. So, and I can explain why. You know, that's maybe a whole other podcast. But the
I
whole
got you.
the whole vibe didn't sit with me. I found that the image of agency life, you know, ping pong table in the office, beers on a Friday, it was all really, that felt like cover for not treating your staff properly and overworking them. And I saw a quote the other day, which was kind of workplace informality is the first step towards removing your employees' rights and well-being. And I felt that a few years ago. So I ended up going it alone again, with the intention of taking myself seriously rather than just being a kind of seat of the pants freelance guy. I thought I need to be a business. I need my clients to look at me as if I'm a business.
Gotcha.
So I started really slow. Really kind of took my time. Didn't really focus too much on growth. Focused more on getting the fundamentals right and making sure that my clients were happy. And once I got my head around that and figured out, you know, what can I pretty much guarantee them, I then started adding in little bits. I guess it was kind of like making a soup,
Okay.
and you get the stock kind of good, and you know that it's not going to, you know, taste too horrible, and then you experiment and you think, well, maybe I'll throw this in and
Right.
see how it goes. So I was a publicist. I was running my publicity and content agency for a few years, and then I had what people would call a light bulb moment, which led to the book. So what happened was, one of my favorite clients, who, it was a kind of family-owned logistics firm, and as part of their logistics operation. They offered removals, storage, shipping, executive relocation, commercial relocation. So they had trucks, they had warehouses, they had former military people working for them.
Gotcha.
And it was a great company, and I loved. Well, it still is a great company. I don't work with them anymore.
Right.
We're still friends. There was a conversation. My client rang me and he said, "I've got a problem. We are getting we're getting heavily criticised on Twitter by one guy." And he said, "Here's what's happened. This guy, he shipped some tools from the UK to New Zealand, and he didn't complete his customs declaration correctly, and now his tools are held in New Zealand. He needs to go and do this job that he's kind of traveled over for. He doesn't have the right tools. He's losing his mind and he's blaming us." So I said, "Okay, well, let's prepare a response." Now, the first instinct I had was, we'll start with sorry and we'll work from there. So I said, "Okay, we need to apologize." As soon as those words left my lips, the client said, "Well, I'm not apologizing, because I told this guy weeks ago that he needed to get this paperwork sorted, because we've seen this before. We can't do the paperwork legally. It has to be the owner. We can advise," which we did. He ignored us, or forgot to do it. So we're actually not at fault. And I pushed back a little bit and I said, "Yeah, but you kind of got to apologize. This guy's annoyed. People are seeing the criticism." And the client said, "Well, if we apologize, we're publicly accepting that we've done something wrong. And we haven't done anything wrong. And I don't want to do it," basically. So he overruled me, and we had to work from a different playbook from that moment on. So, but right, if we can't use sorry, what do we do? And so I went away and I said, right, we need to explain. We need to be sympathetic, but we need to explain. So we responded to the guy, and we didn't say sorry. We said, we understand that this is inconvenient and that you're going to need a solution. Here's what we think you should do. Here's what we told you to do. And we want to help you, but we just missed out the apology. And I sat back after that thinking, right, we are going to get a kind of barrage of criticism for this. He's going to notice that we didn't apologize. And he actually surprised me. He came back and he almost apologized himself.
Wow.
And that kind of made me think, why have I been apologizing on behalf of my clients when they didn't necessarily do something wrong? So from that moment on, I started kind of monitoring corporate apologies and just seeing how many were for things that the organization didn't necessarily need to say sorry for, and also kind of looking at how good they were and looking at the little habits and trends. And fortunately for me at the time, I was working with an academic. He's from LA, but he lives over here in Manchester, called Professor Sir Cary Cooper. And he's a big deal organizational psychologist. And I was lucky enough to be introduced to him a couple of years before, just through chance. I was looking for somebody to comment on a study that a separate client had done. And we hit it off. We worked together, on articles, on ideas. He would provide his expertise for free to me. So I said to him, I think we should write an article about corporate apologies. And he said, yeah, let's do it. So we started working on it, and we realized pretty quickly that there was just far too much to fit into one article. So what do you do when you've got too much of an article? You write a book. So that is the potted history of how I went from wanting to be a musician to becoming a journalist, then a publicist, and then an author. And that's kind of it. There's a few twists and turns on the way that I've missed out, but that's kind of the short version.
Got you. Thank you for sharing that. And that's a great segue. Thank you for setting that up, Sean, for sure. And the name of the book, Startup Nation, is The Apology Impulse: How the Business World Ruins Sorry and Why We Can't Stop Saying It. And once again, Sean, we talked off air a little bit about this fascinating book, great book. And the reason I like this
Thank
book
you.
is because, oh no, absolutely. And you talked about Sir Cary Cooper. He's actually the co-author of this book,
Yes.
like you said before. The reason I love this book is because a lot of times small businesses and entrepreneurs, they don't really have the war chest, as to say, like the big companies, the Fortune 500 companies have and stuff like that. But a lot of the stuff and the practicality solutions in this book, you don't need a lot of money, if at all, if money at all, to kind of go the right way as far as like when crisis management or apologizing or not apologizing in that regard. So I was actually going to ask this earlier, but you kind of, talked about it in your story a little bit. Kind of talk about the explanation between there's times to apologize, but there's also times to just explain. Like how, if I'm a small business owner, how do I make sure I determine which one is the correct course? Like, what are some of those factors I need to be mindful of?
Okay, so the first thing any business owner should do, and I guess you've got lots of business owners listening to this.
Absolutely.
If you don't have a crisis management plan, do it today, because the last time that sort of the worst time to do it is when you're in a crisis.
Fair enough.
So
It's like insurance.
yeah, you'll be grateful when you've got it. And a crisis communications plan and a crisis management plan, it doesn't need to be complicated. You need to identify the risks that you face running your business. So make a
Right.
list on a piece of paper. What can go wrong? If you're let's say you've got a burger van, what can go wrong? So that, the worst thing really that can go wrong is food poisoning, something like that. People get
Right.
sick.
Right.
Maybe you hire somebody new and they're accidentally overcharging people. Maybe you do an advert and you use a word that you don't realize can be offensive to people in a different local market.
Right.
That can happen a lot. That happened to McDonald's in Portugal.
Mm.
They had a promotion that leveraged the term Bloody Sunday. Now, outside of Ireland, that's fine, but Irish people, maybe not now that we've got this virus going around, but Irish people go to Portugal, Irish people see this advert and they think, well, that's trivializing Bloody Sunday. That is a
Right.
problem you probably didn't realize you had. So make a list. Start with the most severe sort of catastrophic thing that you can do wrong as a business, and then make a separate list, which is your values and how you want to be perceived by your customers. What contract are you entering with your customers? So that could be lots of different things. Your insurance company, their contract is, we're going to try and get out of paying out, but within the law will probably pay out if you make a legitimate claim. So nobody expects their insurance company to be benevolent. But if you look at a company like Ben and Jerry's, their contract with their consumers is, we care about social justice, we care about the environment, as well as selling you ice cream. We're going to do some good. We're going to invest in these initiatives.
Right.
So think about your values as a business. And then when something goes wrong, you need to look at, does that failure, A, have you infringed your consumers' rights? And B, have you let them down on the values that you promised to uphold? And they're two different things. So if this hypothetical burger truck is, the burgers are fine, everybody's enjoying the burgers, but there's something going on behind the scenes. Maybe men are getting paid more than women. Maybe their hiring policies aren't fair. That's part of the social contract that nowadays consumers demand. So
Absolutely.
You've effectively got two ways to fail as a business. You've got an operational failure. You run out of burgers. That's an operational failure. And then you've got a culture failure. And this is something we talk about a lot in the book, because they are two different types of crisis. And ironically, the operational failures are easier to deal with because consumers understand them better. So in the UK a couple of years ago, KFC literally ran out of chicken.
Right.
They switched suppliers and there was a mix-up, and there was a period of about 2 weeks where, excuse me, there was a lot of restaurants shut down. Now, that is a pretty big failure. KFC has one job.
Yeah, exactly. They literally have one job. You're absolutely right.
Yeah, and they failed, but they not only kind of navigated that crisis, they turned it into a marketing opportunity. they laughed at themselves and they used adverts that kind of referenced their failure, and consumers forgave them. And the reason they forgave them was because they understood that mistakes happen, and the KFC had communicated, okay, we switched suppliers and there's been a supply chain issue, we don't have the chicken. That was pretty much the message.
Right.
But then your cultural failures, they're a lot harder to deal with, because you're apologizing for infringing people's feelings rather than their rights. So, and there's been so many examples of this over the past few years where companies and big organizations have done things not necessarily operationally bad, but culturally a little bit questionable. And these things just take off. They take on a life of their own. And they are so tricky to say sorry for, because everybody has a different opinion about it. And that's one of the big challenges. If a flight is delayed, everybody understands, okay, that flight was 10 minutes late or 2 hours late. And it's pretty much the same thing. It's the same level of inconvenience. But if that airline puts out an advert that offends people, you're going to have people who are massively offended at one end of the spectrum, and then you're going to have people at the other end of the spectrum saying, I can't believe all these idiots are offended. And you've got to manage all those different sentiments, and you've got to make sure you alienate people, because apologies can alienate as well as kind of repair. So it's really tricky.
Thank you for sharing that. And Sean, speaking of airlines, and you kind of poked fun at yourself a little bit about this in the beginning of the book, it seems like airlines apologize more than anybody, right? And so one particular airline, United, had a couple of issues, and they came up with this infamous word, reaccommodating. So why did that word, when it came to United, reaccommodated, come so cringeworthy? And why does it seem like airlines always apologize?
The audio went, but I think I got the gist.
Sorry about that.
Why do airlines tend to apologize more?
Yeah, why does it seem like they apologize like almost every other day?
So if you think about the average consumer, they tend to, if you're buying a Starbucks, you think, yeah, I'm gonna go and grab a coffee. I'm gonna swing by Starbucks. And if something goes wrong at Starbucks, the order's wrong, the milk's too hot, whatever, it's not the end of the day. And if you picture your average airline customer, they're already in a state of anxiety. The typical airline customer is pretty much one inconvenience away from losing it. And the airlines have to factor that in. Then you've got to factor in the fact that it is literally a metal tube flying through the sky. So airlines are fixated, quite rightly, with safety. So if it isn't safe, it's not taking off, hopefully. So what that means is they're much more prone. There's so many moving parts. There are so many things that can go wrong. They're much more prone to disappointing their customers, because the alternative is to take risks with their safety. So airline customers are pretty much the worst case scenario before you've even made a mistake. They are just waiting for things to go wrong. And what we also have to deal with as professional communicators is your customers now have a direct line to you via social media. Before social media, airlines were making mistakes, but you didn't give every single person on that flight a megaphone to shout at you with.
Right.
You may, when they get off their delayed flight, you may hand them a form and say, here's your feedback form or your complaint form, get a refund, we're sorry. You could do that. The whole world didn't get to see it. Now, with Twitter especially, you only need one person on your flight to have a slightly meaningful Twitter following. They may have a blue tick, and you see this a lot. So you've got all the operational risks, and there are so many of them. There's delays, there's crash landings, there's mass groundings, which happen to JetBlue. That's the operational side. Then you've got the cultural side, and you see things, and I forget which airline. It may have been American Airlines, but I'm not going to stake my reputation on that, but there was a US airline going back a couple of years, and what they did was they had a category of flyer which was kind of a friends and family scheme. So if your mom or your sister worked for the airline, you could get a set amount of free flights.
Gotcha.
Which seems like a good thing. Now, as part of that deal, the airline had a policy that if you're getting on for free, you need to make a little bit of an effort. Here's a dress code. So that seems fair enough, I guess. You don't want to be giving away free tickets to people and they turn up in, their gardening clothes or whatever. So I can relate to that. But then when you try and actually put that into action, you're going to end up in a situation where at some point somebody's son or daughter is going to be turned away from a flight because they're not dressed properly. And just so happened that leggings weren't permissible. They were on the list of please don't turn up for your flight in leggings. Mm-hmm. Now, who wears leggings? Women.
Right.
So this has gone from a line item on a list to a gendered act of discrimination.
Right.
If you're turning people away for wearing leggings, you're discriminating against women.
Exactly.
So this policy, it starts off as a good employee benefit. Your friends, your family can all get free or cheap flights. When you put it into action, you've got a situation where all the men and boys are getting on, and the girls are being told you can't wear leggings. Now, what happens if this particular situation occurs in front of somebody with a Twitter platform? You've got a headline. It's already written. Airline X criticized by influencer Y for sexist dress code. Mm-hmm. That's all you need to say. And then every viral news outlet in the world is going to pick up on that because there's all the ingredients for a great story. There's a little bit of outrage, there's discrimination, there are victims, and then you've got this big corporate villain. So on top of the operational risks and responsibilities that an airline has, they've got all these other little things as well. And then you throw in the behavior of passengers. A badly behaved passenger on any flight pretty much always becomes the airline's problem. Because if they overreact, let's say they throw somebody off a flight for wearing headphones during the safety announcement, that's a big corporate airline mistreating its customers. If they don't take action, i.e. there's a passenger on the flight abusing somebody or being rude to another passenger,
right?
If they don't get them off the flight, they're almost encouraging that kind of behavior. They're not taking their responsibilities seriously. So as far as what kind of business do you want to avoid if you hate saying sorry? Airlines. Do not run an airline.
For sure. Thank you for sharing that. All right, Startup Nation. So I hope you're getting great value from Sean's content, but we got to pay a few bills. Once again, my name is Dominic Lawson, and this is The Startup Life. Startup Nation, do you have friends and loved ones that you want to do something nice for, but maybe they live in the next city, the next state, or even halfway around the world? Well, I have a solution for you. Koya is the new and best way to let your friends and family know you're thinking of them. Choose a friend, record a message, and hide it in a location that they are likely to visit, and give them a clue. When they arrive, your message will instantly appear. You can even send them a gift. Best of all, the app is completely free. Get Koya.com to download it now. That's KETKOYA.com. Or check the link in the show notes. Koya, show you care when you can't be there. This episode is brought to you by Leaner Creamer. Many of us love to power our morning with a good cup of coffee. However, sometimes we feel guilty because we will have to pay for that cup, or let's be honest, Startup Nation, that second cup on the treadmill later, especially when we add creamer. And that's where Leaner Creamer comes in. The gluten-free, sugar-free, lactose-free, but also guilt-free option for your coffee. It uses a combination of coconut oil and natural supplements to jumpstart your entrepreneurial journey for the day. Not a coffee drinker? No problem. Use it as a sugar substitute in your tea, oatmeal, or whatever else you like to sweeten. Go to leanercreamer.com and use the promo code STARTUP15 at checkout. If you are listening to the podcast, the link is there in the show notes. Leaner Creamer. Begin a healthy new chapter. Oralex powers this episode of The Startup Life. Startup Nation, as a podcaster, radio host, and business owner, I know a thing or two about the need for your message to come through clearly to your target audience. The last thing you want when trying to close a big deal over the phone or giving a sales presentation in your conference room is to have the person you are talking to be distracted by either the fact that you sound like you're in a warehouse or an outside noise like a fire truck. Trust me, Startup Nation, I know this all too well from experience. And that is why Oralex has your back. Oralex Acoustics creates professionally tested products that you can trust in a commercial space or at home. Better office acoustics improves intelligibility when video conferencing or generic conversation, reduces stress, and helps build a proactive work atmosphere. From a home studio for my content creators to your office space downtown, your gear performs better in an acoustically treated room. Trust me, you are in good hands with Oralex, as they are the #1 brand in acoustics, providing trusted solutions for over 40 years. Also, you can download the Oralex Acoustic Treatment mobile app in the Apple or Google Play Store to give you specifically designed and instantaneous recommendations for various room types. Go to Oralex.com and use the promo code STARTUP in all caps for 10% off your entire order. The link is there in the show notes if you are listening to the replay on the podcast. So if you are ready to stop sounding like you're having a sales meeting in a sports arena, go with Oralex. Professional audio made simple. Welcome back, Startup Nation, as we continue our conversation with Sean O'Meara, the author of The Apology Impulse. But in that same vein, Sean, I want to ask you this because, we live in a very PC, I'm not going to say easy to get offended, but it's like there's a lot of landmines out there, right?
Yeah.
So it's like when you're a company or small business owner, startup founder, entrepreneur, whatever the case may be, it can be kind of difficult when to apologize, when not to apologize, and stuff like that. And so that's why this is a great book, Startup Nation, The Apology Impulse. We have a link in the show notes for you to purchase that book straight from Amazon or wherever else you like to get your favorite books. And it's also available in audio version as well. If for those of you who like to, read your books or listen to your books while you exercise or work out or working in your business and stuff like that, we have the link in the show notes for that as well. Now, Sean, when I was reading the book, man, I feel like when you talk about Tony Hayward and Startup Nation, if you don't know who Tony Hayward is, he was the guy who was running BP at the time of the great Gulf Coast oil spill in the Gulf Coast here in the United States. And so honestly, man, I feel like you could have written an entire chapter dedicated to Tony. Because it seemed like he just kept getting in his way. Why was that happening? What was Tony's issue? Like, it just seemed like he just kept getting in his own way. And what can we learn from that?
So I think the short answer to the question, what was Tony's issue?
Yeah.
Tony's issue was that he was an engineer and not a communicator.
Fair enough.
When I was writing the book, Carrie and I, we felt like we got to know these people, and I ended up feeling a bit sorry for Tony because
I did too, actually.
Yeah, he was CEO of a huge company going through a huge public crisis. Now, he wasn't a trained communicator. He'd got to where he'd got to because he was a good engineer and he was good with numbers.
Right.
And that's fine if you're running an oil company until one of your oil wells spring a leak. So what he did, his big mistake, and this is one of the key takeaways from the book, is your apology should never, ever be about you. Doesn't matter how good your apology is.
I hear that.
The people you're saying sorry to do not care about how this situation makes you feel.
Absolutely.
Now, that truth, that gets amplified and magnified the more severe the situation. And
right.
the BP oil spill was pretty severe. Now, people forget, because Tony's apology was so bad, they forget that people actually died during this situation. There was, I think, 11 people lost their lives. Now, Tony had kind of he'd got an F- pretty much all the way through this, and then just to make sure he definitely didn't pass, he, during a press conference, he was trying to apologize for something else, and I think this is the irony of it. He was sitting in front of a room full of journalists, and he said, "Nobody wants this over more than me. I want my life back." Now,
Right.
that whole crisis
That's hard to hear, man.
yeah, yeah, and I'm sure the people who literally wanted their life back were the 11 poor people that died.
Exactly.
So it was just a moment where he let his guard down, and he permitted himself to put his feelings and his needs before the needs of not just his customers, but the people affected by what happened. And there were so many different people that were affected by it. You have environmental groups that have got to do the cleanup. You've got businesses on the Gulf Coast. You've got hotels, restaurants, leisure businesses. They're all affected. You've got pension holders. A lot of pensions were dependent on the performance of that company.
Right.
So his big mistake, really, and he wasn't a charismatic communicator to begin with, was making it about himself. And that is, if people read the book and they take one lesson and one lesson only, it's don't make it about yourself, because even the best apology in the world is going to get ruined if you bring your feelings into it. So
For sure.
keep it about, what you did and the impact it's had and what you're going to do about it.
For sure. For sure. Now, I know you mentioned in the book that sometimes there are certain apologies that are often or best given by men, and some are often or best given by women, whether it be operational or like a social type of thing. Do you think they probably should have, maybe gone in a different direction when it goes to BP and Tony Hayward? Not necessarily with a woman or a man, but just somebody else who was probably a better communicator in that regard?
Yeah, I think the big problem, and you see some organizations, you can tell the moment they realize, oh, this isn't working. Let's get this person away from the microphone.
Exactly.
BP didn't do that. They kind of left him to struggle in public. And they eventually did kind of move him to one side, and they brought in an associate, I think, of Dick Cheney, who was used to dealing with criticism.
Right.
And they let that person handle it. I forget the person's name. But going back to your point about men and women, now I kind of hesitated about exploring that, because I thought,
for sure,
if somebody reads this, if somebody scans the book and they see me kind of talking about how different genders communicate, I could be the one apologizing for
absolutely. Right. I definitely understand that. Yeah.
I had to be really careful about how I talked about it, and it was based on a few different studies, and they really were to do with perceptions, consumer perceptions.
Absolutely, yeah.
The reason that we tend to respond better to women apologizing is it's actually down to old-fashioned sexism. And
I hear that. Okay.
So so let's go back to the operational and the cultural. So
sure.
When an operational failure happens, what you really want is a solution. So due to like our own inherent biases,
okay,
we think men are going to deliver the solution better than women. So we respond better as consumers to a male figure. Now, we shouldn't do, and there's lots of reasons and lots of fantastic female CEOs and CTOs out there who can solve problems better than I can, better than Carrie Cooper can, better than most men. But because of how consumers perceive women leaders, we don't really realize it. And the flip side of that is when it's more of a cultural, feelings-based failure, women tend to be perceived better. And what that says is it's kind of it's a bad reflection on us as consumers, but it feeds into a little bit about how organizations themselves want to be perceived.
Right.
And going back to Mark Zuckerberg and Facebook and the Cambridge Analytica scandal, and the various other scandals that Facebook and Zuckerberg have had in the past few years, there was a turning point a few years ago where he was in it's Congress, is it Congress where they get dragged in and they have to answer questions?
Yeah, like Senate hearings, something like that. Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
Yeah, pardon me, Senate hearing. So he was at a Senate hearing, and then the next time Facebook had to go to one of those, he wasn't there, and the person who went in his place was gonna just hesitate here.
Sheryl Sandberg.
Yeah,
yeah,
that's the name.
Gotcha.
And Facebook was automatically perceived more positively because I think people were just sick of hearing Mark Zuckerberg say sorry.
That's
and
true.
B, because Cheryl, again, I'm not saying this is true, but she was perceived to be more warm. She was perceived to be more compassionate. Now, I'm going to sort of go out on a limb and say you put anybody next to Mark Zuckerberg and they will come across as more compassionkind and more warm.
That's fair.
It's
right,
major
that's fair.
flaw.
Right.
Yeah.
He kind of had a bit of a bit of a Tony Hayward in him in the regard of like, he's not very charismatic or anything like that. You know what I mean? So no, I definitely understand that.
Yeah. And I think Jack Dorsey was there as well. And Google were notably not there. I think they empty chaired them. I think the Senate hearing actually pointed a microphone at an empty armchair.
Right.
To kind of highlight the point. So Cheryl's there, and in her own right, Cheryl is an exceptional leader, and her resume speaks for itself. She doesn't need me to say, "Isn't she great?" But it was really interesting that Facebook obviously thought, right, it was either let's put a woman front and center, or let's just move Mark to the side. His face is grating on people. So yeah, the woman versus man thing, it is a thing. And companies tend to it's a self-fulfilling thing, because companies read these studies and they go, consumers respond better to women when it's a cultural failure. So, okay, who's our most senior woman? Let's get her out there.
Right.
Now, if we keep repeating that, consumers will get used to, who's apologizing. Well, an oil rig has exploded. We're going to hear from a guy. Oh, the company has been criticized for, gender discrimination in the boardroom. Let's get a woman.
Yeah, for sure.
So it can be weaponized a little bit, and organizations can hide behind their spokespeople as well.
Gotcha. Thank you for sharing that. And I think it's important to highlight that, because I mean, what I do know about the marketplace is that they're quite savvy and they pick up on things. And then after a while, I believe that, especially in the world that we, live in, the Me Too movement and stuff like that, I think consumers can start to pick up on stuff like that. Oh, they're just trotting her out because she's a woman. Oh, they're just trotting him out because he's a man, or, for operational purposes and stuff like that. And one thing I will say is that, when it comes to having somebody to apologize for it, when you think about Mary Barra of GM, she was out front and she took onus, and she really has turned around GM from the crisis that they were having. So while it can be weaponized, we definitely have seen that women can definitely take any role on, whether it's operational or cultural, and it doesn't have to be weaponized, as you say. So I appreciate you sharing all of that for sure. Once again, we're talking to Sean O'Meara, the author of The Apology Impulse. Now, I know a few more questions before we transition, to something else. I know as a kid, my mom was a big fan of British shows. And one of those shows is Are You Being Served? You talk about that in the book, about a certain joke that was told in the elevator. And as soon as I read it, I thought it was hilarious, right? But if you're not if you've never seen Are You Being Served or something like that, then you can obviously see, how that can be a bit jarring of a joke that he made about, women's underwear or whatever the case may be. But that guy decided he wasn't going to apologize either, right? Kind of share that story a little bit, if you would, Sean.
Okay, so this is the one where the lesson is certainly, there's two lessons here. Context is key.
Absolutely.
And the kind of old mafia saying, never apologize, never explain. So let's do the background first. So the start of Are You Being Served? Now, it's a little bit before my time, but I do remember the reruns.
Right.
The opening sequence is it's not really a song. It's kind of background music, and you hear a woman's voice, and she's announcing each floor as the elevator goes up. Because Are You Being Served is set in a department store.
Right.
So first floor menswear, second floor children's wear, third floor underwear, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I've heard this joke been made in elevators in the UK, and it is, it's a dad joke. It's a classic kind of harmless little, you get in a lift.
Right.
And instead of saying floor 3, you say ladies' underwear. It's just a joke. Now, if you've never seen the show or you've never heard the joke, and somebody gets in a lift and says ladies' underwear, you're probably just going to think that person's a bit weird.
Right.
If you don't get the reference. Or if you're at a academic conference and the hot topic is already going to be sexism and discrimination, and a kind of I don't want to be rude, an older guy gets in a lift. He's probably quite senior. He was a pretty well-known professor.
Right.
He gets in and he starts talking about ladies' underwear. It's going to make people feel awkward.
Of course.
Now, I felt really sorry for this guy as well, because I just thought, you could have quashed the whole thing. Could have gone away really quick if the person that had put in the complaint against him had accepted his explanation. He tried to explain. He said, I'm making a joke. You didn't get the joke, but if all the evidence is there that this was a joke. Here's the reference. Now, by him doing that, the person who complained, she dug her heels in. She wanted an apology, and it's one of those unfortunate situations where the more you try and manage it, it's kind of the Barbra Streisand effect. The more you want it to go away, the more people look at it.
Right. And
our wonderful viral news media really kind of whipped that one up. So I think objectively, if you took away all the emotion and said, did this guy owe anybody an apology? I don't think the majority would say yeah. I think most people would agree. Okay, the joke was kind of corny and out of date, but if you think about the intent, what possible intent was there that we could point to that he would need to apologize for? The intent behind a joke, unless it's deliberately designed to marginalize or to make fun of people who you shouldn't really make fun of. The intent behind a joke is to make people laugh. And when you're getting in a lift and a lift's crowded, I feel awkward in crowded lifts. My instinct is to sort of say something to kind of lighten the mood a little bit. I don't do it, but it's there. I'm always searching for something to say. Fortunately for me, I never think of something in time, so I guess I escape. But you can understand why people do that. But he said it, people heard it, people complained. And the interesting thing about that scenario was he did refuse to say sorry.
Right.
And he refused to say sorry, even when this thing was in all the papers. People were calling for him to be sacked, because it takes on a life of its own. It's no longer, this guy made a joke, some people didn't get the joke. It becomes, professor refuses to apologize over sexism row. And you kind of, you can remove the bottom layer. You can remove the fact that this is a guy trying to make a joke, and you just say, okay, professor, position of influence, position of power, in a lift with women. So a male kind of in a lift with women, sexism, refusing to apologize. When you just focus on that, you glance at it and you just take it in that context, it starts to look worse than it really was. So I was kind of watching that thinking, this guy's going to apologize soon. He's going to have no choice, but he didn't. And I kind of applaud him for it, although that sounds a little bit mean.
Right.
Because if he had apologized, it would have devalued the whole idea of what an apology is. He clearly wasn't sorry. He was defending himself. So, he maintained his integrity, in my opinion.
I hear that. Thank you for sharing that. And Startup Nation, like I said, once again, the book is The Apology Impulse. It has tons of stories and tons of anecdotes like that. There's one about Airbnb and going overboard with an apology, which I thought was fascinating as well. And just other type of stories. There's even the one where you talk about the one at the Oscars where they announced the wrong the wrong award winner and stuff like that. And I thought in that one, that was very interesting because it really talks about, and it really highlights this, and you talk about this all over the book. It really highlights that the language jujitsu that people go through when it comes to apologizing or more so not apologizing. All right.
Yeah.
So Startup Nation, I don't want to give it all away. So you got to purchase the book, The Apology Impulse, How the Business World Ruins Sorry and Why We Can't Stop Saying It. I appreciate all of that stuff for sure. So I want to ask you this. Let's transition, man, because you run a company, Essential Content. Just kind of tell us a little bit about the company and the work that you do there.
So we pretty much do two things. We do reputation. So that is proactive comms, public relations, reputation management. And we do content. So you're a business, you want people to understand better what you do, what your story is. We help brands tell stories and communicate what they know as well as what they do. That's a very important thing that I tell all my clients is people don't really care about your product necessarily, but they might care about what you know.
Absolutely.
So we do the kind of on-page stuff, websites, all those kind of owned media. But the bulk of what we do is public relations. So trying to make our brands a little bit more famous, trying to improve their reputation, improve recognition. And what a lot of people don't realize about public relations as well is there's a fair bit of boring but important stuff going on behind the scenes. So making sure things in the media are accurate, making sure they're fair, because something can be accurate but not fair.
Absolutely.
I had a good example of that at the end of last year, where a client, an existing client, got in touch and said, "I've got a friend who runs a business, and he's really worried because they're moving from bricks and mortar to clicks and mortar. So they were a health food, kind of fast food, health food kind of thing, on a few high streets, and they were going to get rid of their high street locations, move to a kitchen, a kind of commercial kitchen, and do delivery. And their worry was if their high street presence disappeared, what would it be reported as? And they were right to worry, because if a shop starts disappearing, it looks like they've gone bust. So they said, we really need to kind of communicate that we're still here, we're just changing. So we were able to, through outreach to media, through briefing the media with press releases, giving them access to decision makers at this company, tell that story positively. Because if we'd have just left it, what would have happened would be somebody on Twitter goes, "Hey, this shop's closed. What's going on?" And then someone else will, "Oh, it looks like they've gone out of business. Their shop over in my neighborhood is closed as well." So that's kind of the less glamorous side of public relations. And one thing we try and do as a business is explain to our clients, and to people who aren't clients as well, we try and educate generally, is whether or not you hire a public relations company, or you have a public relations specialist, or even a whole team in your business, public relations is something you should be doing all the time anyway. It's not an add-on. It's part of the whole secret sauce to what makes your business good. Your image, your reputation, it should be part of your daily thinking. And I think because a lot of businesses don't take that approach, that's why you do see a lot of the, kind of going back to the book, that's why you see a lot of these bad apologies and these reputational garbage fires that just kind of keep popping up. So we, we're not a huge company. There's a kind of gang of us, and we love what we do, and I think that's really important. Now, not everybody does kind of get up in the morning and think, right, I need to make sure that my clients are fairly represented today. But as a small business owner myself, I do, I take personally the situations where my clients aren't treated fairly in the media. It doesn't happen every day, but I like to kind of, I think it's a little bit like kind of talking myself up a bit here. It's a little bit like being a boxer. You don't just get in the ring. You've got to spar a little bit and sharpen your instincts and things like that. So, that's us. We're based in Manchester, in the north of England, and we've got clients all over the world. And every day we're learning different things about different markets, different cultures.
I bet.
And it's a great gig. I feel really lucky to do it, and obviously it brings opportunities like talking to you and writing a book and things like that. So it's a cool industry. The irony is PR has a bad reputation. I'm still trying to figure out why did we let that happen. We are the reputation people. Yeah, people, when you say picture a PR person, a PR guy or a PR woman, you don't have a positive association with those things. You kind of think of a slick, kind of misleading sort of shadow figure, and we're not. We're here to help.
Right, of course. And I imagine it's because, and it alludes back to what you were saying and the book. I imagine it's because the whole thing is like, usually a PR firm is hired when something bad happens, right? And somebody doesn't want to apologize correctly. And so it's like, there's that, the PR firm here, they come with the wordsmith jujitsu again, you know what I'm saying? And not really, I wonder if that's what it is. What do you think?
I think it is. Yeah, I think
which is unfair because I imagine there's, you do a lot of, stuff on the opposite side of that spectrum as well. But I'm sorry, I mean to cut you off.
No, it's fine. You're right. I think when you look at most big scandals, if you dig deep enough, there is a publicist in there somewhere.
Right.
And the publicists the kind of rule of doing publicity is never to become the story.
Mm-hmm.
Once the publicist is the story or is part of the story, the whole thing is a failure. And in the UK particularly, there are a few high-profile publicists who I think some of them are okay, but on the whole, the kind of image of publicity is, oh, here they come. They're gonna sort of pull the wool over our eyes a little bit and do a bit of misdirection. Right. And we are guilty of that as an industry. And I'm not sitting here saying, and we're here to change it and save the day, because sometimes we have to get our hands dirty a little bit as well. But our goal is always to protect the client's reputation. But it's a it's kind of a self-rectifying system. You can only protect the client's reputation if there's something left to protect. And if they truly have done something really, really bad, you can't. You have to step away. I've had that situation where I've had to sit down with a client and say, we're screwed. This is bad. You just need to take this one on the chin. And I've had some near misses with clients as well. I still remember the client who rang me and said, one of our trucks has crashed into a doggy daycare truck. And the mental image of a kind of truck on its side and dogs, fortunately there were no dogs in the truck.
Right.
But for a second, that image in my head was like, right, well, that's the end of that. This is going to be bad.
Right. And I bet the image was not even necessarily full grown dogs, but puppies, right? Like cute, cuddly puppies, right?
Yeah, the cutest puppies you can think of. And
exactly.
the one photo that gets taken, it looks like the driver's laughing. That kind of thing. Because these are optics. These optics matter. And the kind of what happened and what it looks like can often be two really different things. You only need to kind of be rubbing up against something even slightly shady, and then you get infected by it, and you can't wash the stink out of some situation. There are public figures that don't work today, former celebrities, because they're just associated with things that stink. And sometimes it's justified, sometimes it really isn't.
Right. Right. Thank you for sharing all of that for sure. So before we go ahead and cut out today, I just want to say thank you so much for sharing your time, sharing your value. Once again, Startup Nation, the book is The Apology Impulse. We have a link there in the show notes for easy access for you to purchase that book. You gave amazing value about, how to apologize, when not to apologize, and everything in between, Sean. So I really appreciate your time. But for now, for sure. But now I'm actually going to turn the microphone over to you, because there's an entrepreneur out there that's feeling either stuck in their business or they're afraid to start, man. Give them some words of encouragement to tell them to keep moving forward.
Okay, so I struggle with giving advice because I'm bad at taking my own advice. So I'm gonna talk to the person who's thinking of. I mean, a lot of people, they're in a job they don't like and they have an idea.
All right.
There's two kind of people I want to talk to. So I'll talk to that person first. If you're in a job you don't like and you want to change and you think you've got something you can turn into a business, ignore everybody that tells you to just do it, to just take the leap. Don't do that. What you need to do is start slowly, a couple of hours a day, because if you give up your job and you hit a rough couple of days, that's going to frighten the pants off you, and you're going to be without a job. So the best way to do it, in my opinion, and it is only my opinion, is to develop it on the side. Keep the job, use your lunch hour, use an hour in the morning. What I did years ago is I just got up 2 hours earlier and did my kind of pitching and client development for my side business before I went into the office. Now I'm lucky enough not to have to do that. So a lot of advice is, if you want to run your own business, you've got to take major risks. You do have to take risks, but you don't have to risk your livelihood. If you're in a job you hate, stick with it for a bit and just use those little bits of free time. If you can get away with it, and don't tell anyone I said this, but you can do it at work as well. There's tricks you can use. You can sort of have a spreadsheet open and kind of tab back to that if your boss comes, but do it gradually. Prepare yourself to make that jump. Don't just sort of dive in and think, right, I'm ditching the job, I'm going to do this. Only do that if you've got the cash to support yourself for 3 months. That is my first bit of advice. My second bit of advice is to the person that's made the leap and is running a business. Now, when you run your own business, you're going to have low value days where you can't think of a single idea. You can't get things done. You're sitting staring at your computer screen or staring at your notepad. Now, you have those kind of days when you work for other people, but in that situation, you've just got to pretend that you're being productive. You have to wait until the clock hits 5:30 or 6, and then you go home and you just think, right, well, I didn't really do much, but I'm pretty sure nobody noticed. When you've got your own business, you don't have to perform that. You don't have to go through that charade. So what I have is what I call a jacking in policy, where if you're having a low value day, you're not getting anything done, go and have a low value day somewhere else. Go and do it at the park. Go and walk the dog. Go to the beach. Go to a museum. Do something where you can be low value, but enjoy yourself. Don't torture yourself sitting in an office or sitting at your desk if it's not happening, because some days it just doesn't happen. And that jacking in policy that I have has saved me so many times. And every time I do it, I come back the next day feeling better, more productive, more creative, and better equipped to solve problems.
I hear that. Thank you so much, Sean. And that's going to wrap up this session of The Startup Life. Sean, did you enjoy being on the show, my man?
It was an absolute pleasure. I've done a lot of podcasts, and this was up there with the best. Really enjoyed it. Thanks for having me.
Oh, man. Don't butter me up like that. I appreciate that. As always, Startup Nation, if you have an idea, be about that life, the startup life.
If you want to let us know what you think about our show, have an idea for a show topic, or would like to advertise on our show, send us a message on the Startup Life Podcast Facebook page. And while you are there, like and follow our page as well. It's a great way for us to engage with you, Startup Nation, and really grow our community. The link is there in the show notes. Subscribe to the show, as it can be heard on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Stitcher Radio, Spotify, or even on your Facebook timeline or any other platform you like to get your podcast. If you are listening on Apple Podcasts and you find our content valuable, please give us a 5-star rating, as it will help us climb the charts and help more people find our show. You can also listen to the show on the Startup Life Podcast new website. There you will find the all-new startup blog where I write on many topics that are interesting and helpful to you on your path to entrepreneurship. And hey, if you have an idea, be about that life, the startup life.